Thank you.
Chair, turning to D687. He is a formerly detained person at Brookhouse, a core participant in this inquiry. He's vulnerable and unable to provide evidence to the inquiry. He has, however, provided a witness statement dated the 8th of January of 2018 in judicial review proceedings. Albeit unsigned, the inquiry intends to adduce his evidence in the form of that witness statement in due course. He is from Somaliland. He came to this country when he was 10 years old as a refugee. He has suffered from mental health problems since he was a teenager and has twice attempted suicide before being in immigration detention. He's approximately 10 convictions for criminal offences. He was in detention at Brook Immigration Removal Centre and Dover Immigration Removal Centre prior to Brookhouse, following periods in prison. He was at Brookhouse between October 2016 and the 13th of May 2017, when he was moved to the Verne. He described his experience of detention at Brookhouse. He says he was the subject of racist abuse by staff members. Officers regularly used excessive force to control detained persons, and other detained persons told him that they had been beaten up in their rooms. He says that his mental health problems worsened in detention. He was depressed, stressed, emotional, and heard voices. He reported these issues as well as a previous assault to healthcare, but little was done. A Rule 35 report was completed, but the Home Office refused, he says, to release him. Where a concern is raised regarding the welfare of a detained person, an ACDT plan should be raised, something I dealt with yesterday. And it's the system used to remind everyone for monitoring detained persons considered to be at risk of self-harm, and is operated across the detention estate and modelled on that used by the prison service. On the 5th of May, he was placed on ACDT because he was feeling suicidal and he threatened an overdose. On the 13th of May, he attempted to commit suicide and was restrained by members of staff. He is seen on the footage in a toilet, and we will see the footage in a few moments. He'd torn his t-shirt into strips and had tied it to the bathroom rail and attempted to hang himself. Members of staff enter the room by force. He says that he was pushed to the floor, someone grabbed his neck, and he couldn't breathe. Someone twisted his fingers, and someone, he says, kneed him hard in the ribs. Another staff member sat on his back. The t-shirt was cut from his neck, and they eventually let him go. He was transferred to the Verne. During the course of the incident, he was told that the reason for the transfer was that he was not leaving the country anytime soon. On arrival, he was seen by a nurse who sent him to accident and emergency, where he was given painkillers for bruised ribs. As I say, the incident appears in the footage. It also appeared in the panorama broadcast, and we will now play it. There are two clips, one lasting a little short of 28 minutes, and the other of about 2¼ minutes in length. It is Ken Cov 1016, and the first clip is V 2017-0513 for the 13th of May, treble 011. It starts at 0205.
Put me in a body bag and take me out of here. That's the only way I'm leaving this toilet, bro. I'm telling you, it's not. I'm not having it. I had enough. I don't want to live no more. I was living because of my mom. I've explained it to you. No, fuck off. It's all right. I swear to God, I'll let myself.
Don't come just out and you guys fix it, it's alright, it's alright.
Don't come near me, bro. If you come near me, I swear to God, I'll let myself go.
No, just come sit for a
Then we'll wait for a minute until you pass it, and then we'll cut you down.
Bro,
Nobody's dying today.
No person now, bro. Like, I'm looking to die, bro. You don't understand, bro. I've had enough, bro. I don't want to live no more, bro. You don't understand.
You're not going to die this afternoon.
I don't care, bro. If it's this afternoon or tonight, I'm going to die. That's it, I've had enough. The only reason I'm holding on is because of my mum. That's it, I've had enough now. That's it, I've had enough, bro. I've explained to you that I'm trying to talk to people. No, you don't want to fucking put me on the other side of the country, bro. Bro. Fuck this, bro. I've moved around too many times, bro. I've had enough, bro. You don't understand. I come from Dover to here, to prison, to fucking, and I'm moving on again. Bro, I've had enough, bro. I can't live no more, bro.
The only reason why they moved you down is that there's no flights for you or nothing.
That's a good thing, bro. No flight where, bro? What the fuck am I doing in detention 2 years, bro? 3 years, bro? How the fuck, bro? What am I doing? Like, oh my God, it's long, bro. My identity's been taken, bro. Fuck this, bro.
The reason why they
I've
moved
moved
you
away from my community, from my life, bro.
But the reason they moved you to Gatwick is for good reasons. Because otherwise, if they was going to keep you here, that means they'd want to deport you somewhere. But there's nothing like that going on. That's why they're going to move you somewhere else, which is more comfortable, better.
Well, I don't get no visits. Even here, I don't get no visitors. The only people that come see me. And now I'm going all over. I'm not getting no one to come and see me, bro. I'm alienated where I'm going.
Hand fire, okay? It's probably very unlikely you're going anywhere today, okay?
Well, I had enough, boss. You don't understand. I was doing okay till I fucking come down here. They gave me a job so I can stay. I can keep my mind on things. Yeah, I've been doing all right to deal with this situation. You know this, or you don't know this. It's not like nobody fucking knows. Like I had enough. Like it's like falling to their face. I'm not bullshitting no one. I had enough, bro.
I get it.
Like, I don't know. This is it. This is my last resort, bro. I want to take my own fucking life, but you don't want to take me seriously no more, bro. And I've said this before, my mom's life, bro. I want to be buried next to my brother, bro. I do not want to get deported nowhere. I don't want to any fucking paperwork, bro. I just want to be left in a fucking alone, left in a bag, bro. Because look, I was in myself. I was fucking normal, bro. I was in myself. And I could have been at work now, you know what I mean? I could have been staying proactive, but nah, I got put here, I got to look, cooperate, or you're going to go and move 40. For fucking what? Well, bullshit, bro. No, bro, this is it, then, innit? Right with 40 and this, innit? Fuck it, bro. I fucking died on fucking on 40 and that. Because we're going on square ones and that, bro. I don't want to live it, bro. I don't want to leave this country, you don't understand, bro. All my mates, all my life, all my life is here, bro.
That's what I mean.
Bullshit, bro.
Because you're not leaving the country anytime soon, that's why they would want to take you to Laverne.
I had enough, bro. You know, I can tell the home office I had enough. Yeah, that's it, like, I'm in your care, yeah, tell them, whoever the person that you got in this care, he's had enough, bro. I don't want to do no more detention, bro. They can just write me off, fuck it. The way I'm going, I'm dying anyway. What the fuck? You don't understand,
Why
bro.
would you be dying in Laverne?
Bro, I don't want to go to the fucking bro. I don't want to go nowhere, bro. You don't understand. Just leave me alone. I got bail coming up soon. I put it in writing, bro. Nobody wants to fucking listen. Fuck it. Then this morning I put it in writing. You don't got my request form. I put it in request form. Check the request form. I stated why, the reasons why. Nobody wants to fucking hear me, bro. Fuck everyone, then, innit? I had enough, bro. I swear down, I'm not coming out there, bro. And anyone that comes in me, most likely, I'm gonna let myself go. Like, I'm not even chatting shit, bro. And I will hold myself tight, bro. I don't want to go back to my fucking move life. What do you mean? Why didn't you just let me in the first place? Yeah, I wanted to stay. I told him I didn't want to go in the first place. Yeah. But he told me, yeah, we're going block. You're going to go before. You're going to lose your job. You're going to be left with fucking nothing, basically, innit? Yeah. So I said, man, fuck yourself then. I'm going to come with you, innit? And I'm going to do what I have to do, innit? And look, now I'm here, innit?
What, you've been like this ever since you've been down?
Yeah, no, I wasn't. I was normal. I asked to see the doctor. Remember, I asked to see the doctor to speak to me. The doctor took the fucking piss. He don't want to come down here.
Been here yet?
Bro, the doctor comes on 12:30. I know when the doctor comes back, bro. Comes on 12:30. He goes evening. I know the routine. I've been here too long, bro. I'm not fucking mad, man. So I'm saying that this is making me even more off. Like it's just that I know certain things and I'm getting mugged off. This, nah, bro. I'm fuck this, bro. I'm not.
Do you not think the doctor's seeing everyone in the evening at the moment?
Bro, I've asked to see the doctor yesterday. Today, fucking this morning, the computers are down. He's going to be listening this afternoon. Where is he now? Well, it's been since 12.
You just said he's on evening.
It's fucking 1. Yeah, what's the time now? It's fucking 2, bro.
He's got to see everyone. He's got to see everyone in evening.
I left the wing at 12. Now it's almost 2 o'clock, bro. I'm still staying here after 2 hours. Fuck this, man. I had enough, bro. Doctor don't want to see me. If he really wanted genuinely to come see me, he'll come and see me time ago, bro. Maybe I wouldn't be sitting here, bro.
That's what I'm saying, though. If you say he goes to evening at 12, he might still be there. The reason why you're brought down here for that time is because we was asked to bring you down for that time. The reason why they're late, I don't know.
Well, everyone's taking a piss, bro. I had enough, bro. I swear to God. I don't even know why I'm chatting to you guys, bro. I had enough, bro. I made up my mind, bro. That's it, bro. I just want to go and meet the man up there now. That's, I swear to God, bro. I
You
don't
don't want to see the
know. I don't want to see no one no more, bro. I just want to go up there to myself to go away. You lot can put me in the bag. That's it. You don't have to deal with people words, this and that. Do you know what I mean? Everyone could just fucking get on with their life and that, bro. I've had enough, bro. I just want to go and meet the man up there now. That's it. I've had it. Now, how could the government doing this to me, like, all this time for my fucking mental health to deteriorate in here? I was normal when I come in, bro. Now I'm fucking gone nuts, bro. You don't understand, bro. No one wants to fucking believe me that. I'm telling everyone, look, I'm losing the will to carry on. I'm losing the will to carry on. No one wants to fucking hear me. Alright, fuck everyone then, innit? Fuck everyone, bro, man. I've been put in here, my identity's been taken away. I've been moved away from my community, from my loved ones. You know how long I haven't seen my mum and my brother? Bro, you know, taking the piss, bro, man. Bro, lie, bro, man. So I asked to go to my nan's funeral, and nah, you have to prove it. What the fuck to prove? There's a fucking grave I'm taking people to. My brother's fucking funeral, the same shit. Oh, I have to prove. My brother was a voter, like, he was an electoral voter. To prove where? Everybody knows when someone dies, bro. The council knows, the treasury knows, everybody knows, like, it's not like fucking no one knows, like. It's pissing me off, bro, the whole thing, bro. It's not just one thing, bro. Everything added up, bro. You know, I think it's just one detention. Nah, bro. I wouldn't be the way I am, bro, if I'd come to pay my respect to my brother and my nan and so on. Things that made me the way I am, like, especially the Home Office made me the way I am. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you, like, I was normal, like, when I finished my sentence. Ever since then, I've been detained since 2014, bro, and I'm stuck in here, bro. Bro, this bullshit, bro. I don't know, I had enough, bro, man. That's it, bro. Fuck this, bro. I swear to God, bro. I had it, bro. You don't think I'm just joking around, this is for show.
Nobody's
Mama's
sure.
life,
If
I
we wouldn't be here, would we?
on my mom's life, yeah, you don't think it's a show, yeah.
I don't think it's a
You're gonna see a different side to me. I've been nice to everyone, I've just been biting my tongue, yeah. Like, I've just been me in it, yeah, but I've turned out to me to be fucking someone else. Yeah, I'm a cool guy, bro. Ask anyone, they'll tell you, yeah, I'm happy, but I want to smile, like. I don't want my problem to be affected by everyone else and that. So I keep myself to myself and that. So I make sure that I don't, you know what I mean? Fuck everyone now, bro. I had enough, bro. I swear to God, bro. Everything like, it's a job, bro. I had enough of this shit, bro. Been detained all this time, bro. I want to see someone from the Home Office, bro. It's them that doing this to me, bro. Huh?
When was the last time you spoke?
Yeah, but they give me a monthly report, bro. It's bullshit, bro.
Yeah,
I'm not having this, bro. It just says, JR, my removal. I put it in the fucking JR, bro. It's been a travel document for the last 2 years, bro. You're only supposed to try to get travel document 3 times. After that, if you can't get it, that's it. You have to release the person. What am I doing here after all this time? They tried more than fucking 3 times. Bro, it's bullshit, bro. What's going on, bro? Bullshit, bro.
Do you know when you're seeing them next or not?
I don't know, bro. I had enough, bro. I had enough, bro. You're not gonna try to put me on the bus to go Vans. Fuck, I'm not going Vans, bro. I'm not going nowhere, bro. I swear to God, bro. I'm not going nowhere, bro. I had enough, bro. The only way I'm leaving, if you don't fucking release me from here and tell me, yeah, walk out of this gate, bro. That's the only way I'm walking out of here, bro. Okay, bro. But I've got court coming up soon, bro. How the fuck is my mum gonna come all the way to Birmingham, bro? Yeah, she doesn't even get down here, bro. My mum's depressed, you know, bro. Because what's going on with me, you know. You don't know nothing, bro. Like, I had enough, bro. Like, my whole fucking family's suffering, bro. I'm suffering in here, bro. I had enough, bro. Fuck this, bro.
You alright?
But no, I'm not fucking alright, bro. I had enough, bro. You're not alright, bro. How can I be fucking alright, bro? Do I look alright to you? Bro, I lie, bro. Fucking insults, bro.
What's up? You still want to go more north?
I don't want to go nowhere, bro. I don't want to go nowhere, bro. I don't want to move nowhere, bro. I want to go back to my room, innit? I don't want to go nowhere, bro. Simple as that, innit? Like, there's no way on earth, yeah? My mom's gonna come to Birmingham here to come to court, bro. Yeah, my mom's already depressed as it is, yeah. I put it in writing here to you guys here before all of this happened, yeah. All of this would have been avoided, yeah. But no one wants to fucking hear me. My fucking letter's gone in the bin to someone else. Fuck this, bro. I don't know, bro. I swear to God, anyone come near me, yeah, watch. I'll let myself go, bro. Even if I'm chatting shit, bro. Watch, bro. Bro, I had enough, bro. Bro, I had enough, bro. You don't understand. I had enough of this bullshit, bro. I've been detained over. Huh?
If you said you didn't want to go, how come you had to gear up?
Bro, to fucking show that I'm cooperating. To say that to show that I'm fucking cooperating, saying I'm not fucking cooperating, innit? Okay. The fuck, bro? I asked him, I put it in a letter, I said, I don't want to go. You don't want to fucking hear it. Nah, bro. It's bullshit, bro. Bullshit, bro. Because I don't want to go, it's going to be used against me as well. Nah, bro. Fuck that, bro. Well, that's it, bro. My mother's life here, like, I don't even think like this is gonna go beyond today, innit? You're not gonna close my files, everything, innit? Don't come near me, you know, bro. Don't come near me, bro. Don't come near me, bro. Don't come near me, bro. I'm not joking, bro. Whatever's life, yeah,
Is that your
it's gonna
t-shirt?
end today. Huh?
Is that your t-shirt?
Yeah, that's my t-shirt, bro. Yeah, my own fucking t-shirt, bro. It's my t-shirt, bro. I had enough, bro. You don't think I'm joking, bro? I don't want to live no more, bro. You don't understand. I don't want to.
Why not?
I've said in my prayer this is gonna be probably one of my last fags. I've had enough. What do you mean, why not? Are you stupid, bro? I've been detained for fucking 3 years, bro. I'm fucking British. What the fuck am I doing in here, bro? You told me that, bro.
Yeah, but don't you have a family?
What?
Have you got a light?
Yeah, I'll do it for my mum. I'm not doing it no more, bro. That's it. I've had enough, bro.
Have you got a
Yeah,
light?
I want a light, please, yeah. No, don't come near me, bro.
Well, put it in your mouth, geezer.
Nah, but give me the light, I'll do it myself.
No,
bro.
not
I've
with
got my whole
this
light.
shit. Here, I'll go.
I don't want no
Look,
fucking light.
I'm fucking in.
I don't want no light, bro. Stay away
Fucking
from me, bro, innit?
Open it soft. Still got it round this way. Right, ligatures away.
Get off me now. Get off me now. Get off me now. Bro, this is not gonna end, man. Mother's life, man. Whatever I go, yeah, this is not over, man. What am I doing? See that fucking dab in the box, yeah? That's when it's gonna be over. Watch. When I leave in the box, that's when it's gonna be over. I promise you. I promise you. I promise you, bro. I'm gonna end up fucking leaving in the box, yeah? I promise I'll leave in the box, man. I promise you, bro. Mother's life. You don't think I'm talking shit, what? I had enough, bro. You don't think I'm joking, yeah? It's past, bro. It's past that. I get on my fucking arm, bro. Let off, bro. Look, I'm on the cuff. Get on my fucking... Bro, I swear that I'll start biting people, bro. If you don't fucking... Bro, can you let go of my arm, please? I'm on the cuff. Let go of me, then, innit? I'm cuffed, innit? What are you holding me for? Get on me, then. Stop fucking resting on my arm. Bro, stop resting on my arm, bro. You're breaking my fucking arm, bro. Stop resting on my arm. Bro, I swear to God, I'll start...
Relax, relax.
I'll start spitting or I'll start biting. You lot don't want that. Don't sit on my thing, bro. Whatever you do, don't fucking violate me, because I will fucking violate you lot as well, you know. I give my trainers, bro. The fuck, give my trainers, bro. Give my trainers, bro. Bro, why you got my toilet?
Yeah, relax, relax.
Toilet, bro. My head in the fucking toilet, bro. You fucking taking the piss. Yeah, my head not fucking on the ground, mate. Don't
Take yourself
fucking
off.
on the ground, bro.
Take yourself off.
I'm not on the ground, bro. Leave my head on the ground, bro. Give my trainers, innit? Give my trainers, bro.
And your trainers will come.
Yeah, so I'm gonna stand up to put my trainers in it. Yeah, so now put my trainers in it. What are you doing?
William? Sorry, man.
Get off me now.
You want to take a seat?
Get off me, Bob, man. It's not over, man. Fuck off, man. Get off me, man. Fuck's sake, man. What is life, man? What, man? What's the hell I'm going, man? I'm gonna be fucking pets, man. Watch. Everywhere I go, I'm not finishing this off, man.
Fairly short in fairness, mate, if I'm being honest.
So you're short now.
Promise you, by the end of the month, it's gonna happen in 25 watch. Remember I told you this, yeah?
She's leaning forcefully. In the toilet, in the toilet.
No, I'm not fucking alright, but move away from me, man. I don't want fucking no one come near me, innit? No one fucking come near me, everyone fuck off, innit? You know, piss off. No one fucking cares, you don't fucking leave me alone, bro. Fuck off, man. Leave me alone, innit?
Do you know where you're going?
I don't give a shit. When I do go there, yeah, watch, I'm gonna be a fucking problem, bro. Watch. This is just the beginning of it, mate. Watch. On my mother's life, yeah. Remember I told you, though. Watch, you're gonna get different fucking like, watch. You look, watch. This is what you lot made me, innit? You're gonna get it when I go to the other side, innit? What I've turned out to be since you lot had me, yeah. Watch, you're gonna see it. I've fucking had enough, bro.
Sorry.
I had enough. Bro, explain what? You're shipping me out to the other side of the fucking country. That's what you're doing. How you
Just at the
explain?
moment, yeah. If you say
Bro, I had fucking enough, bro. When I do go there, I want to be trouble as well. I had enough, bro. You lot don't understand, innit? I've been fucking detained 2 years, yeah. My mental health deteriorated. In this place, I was normal when I fucking come in here. Not just Brookhouse, detention since I've been detained, yeah. Well, that's it, bro. I had enough, bro. I want to end my own life, innit? Do you want to know the truth? I want to end my own life. I want to die in this fucking country, buried next to my brother, innit? That's what I want to do, innit? So you lot can fucking hear it, innit, yeah? That's what I want to do, innit? And I'm not going to stop till I fucking succeed, bro. Mother's life. I'm not telling you this. I'm going to till there's every little bit energy left in me till I succeed, watch.
So is it because you should have stayed here, sir, or is it just because you're in the system?
Huh?
Is it because you're annoyed now because you moved from this location, because you've got family?
I had fucking support here. I had everything here. You don't move me. Nobody will support me. Okay, take me what you're taking me. I'm not complying with no one. Every watch when I go there, bro. You're not gonna see this fucking. You're not gonna regret you even took me there on my mother's life. Mama told you this. You're not gonna regret you even moved me out of my room.
Sir.
But
Thank you. And then there shall be a short, as I say, further clip.
I'm stressing out. You don't
We'll
understand
give you a
that.
fine. Okay, we'll do that. I'll give you a fine before you get on. You get on the vehicle, and then when you get to the other end,
I'm cool with you guys. I ain't got no problem with you
you're going to
guys.
say you're going to normal. Okay, you're
Yeah.
normal thing. Otherwise, if you just like go on the other end, I'm being honest, they'll put you straight in the sink.
Yeah, I want to go on. I want to go on a normal way, but it doesn't mean I'm going to behave when I do go there. I'm not telling you
What
this
you
now.
do when you're off on my
You're
vehicle,
gonna
I've got no
see-
control over it. You know what I mean?
Look, like you lot, my behaviour, you lot seen my behaviour in here. My behaviour's been good as gold. But now watch when we're gonna see the other side. Watch how I behave. I've had enough.
But you're
Nobody
okay
wants to
here
hear
now?
me, bro.
You're okay
All
at the moment?
you know how many courses I've done, bro? To want to show that I have changed, bro. Yeah, going into deaf ears, bro. Fuck everyone, then innit? Like I'm gonna just be wherever, then innit? Fuck innit? Nobody wants me to
You're
change,
going to
innit?
behave here for these gentlemen.
Huh?
You're going to behave like most of these gentlemen.
Yeah, I'm sitting down.
You happy we take your cups off and that?
Yeah, I want to behave, but I want to go out for fun, though, bro. Yeah, take my cup, though. I'm not going to do nothing, bro.
So I just want to treat you a bit of respect, a bit of courtesy, you know what I mean? I get what you're coming from, so I totally do, but I can't do nothing about it because you have it over.
I swear down, bro. I had enough, bro. You don't think I'm joking, bro.
So I'll give you a chance.
When I go there, it's gonna be a thing, bro. I had enough, bro.
You okay?
Yeah, no, I'm fucking down
I
right,
know,
bro.
but they're doing it to protect themselves, they're doing it to protect you, so. Okay?
I want to protect themselves. I'm not the man to them, bro.
I know, but they're just doing it for their own safety, so. At the end of the day, you know, he's married, had the kids, he don't want to go home with broken nose, does he? You know? Do you want to have that card, sir? That's what I'm going.
Bro, I swear to God, yeah, watch, bro. This is gonna be the last move that you ever make, bro.
Okay, I'm just trying to lay on the line, be honest with you.
The last move, bro.
Do you want to get the opportunity to check your property just so you've got peace of mind that you've got everything here? So, have you got anything on you, sir, that you want to... Obviously, with the phone, you get a phone the other end. This is normal. SIM card.
One of them, that's my one piece.
That's what I'm saying. So take your SIM card.
Which one's your one? Just pop in there for this vehicle, then you get...
And you've got no SIM in there.
Chris, may I have the excuse, mate? Yeah, if you force it.
One advantage you've got, I know it's a small one, but at least you'll get free credit on your phone, which will start to scratch to the top of your phone.
So moving away, please, from D668 and on to D728. He is not a court participant, and the inquiry has not received a statement from him. However, he appears in key relevant footage, parts of which were also broadcast on the programme, and you may recall I've already summarised this incident from Callum Tully's perspective. On the 6th of July, Callum Tully was conducting observations on D728, who was in a room on E-Wing, but as you heard me say, was covering the observation hatch with toilet tissue. Callum Tully filmed the incident. DCO Charlie Francis and DCM Steve Webb were also in attendance. Francis is heard to say to D728, quote, "Right, if I have to come back here again, you won't be going anywhere today. You'll be staying down here permanently, you understand," end quote. There's an argument with D728, some discussion regarding shop opening hours, his property, and D728 wishing to take a shower. He complains that he doesn't have his medication. And Webb is heard to say, quote, listen, right, shut up a minute. Your fucking attitude depends on how this is going to go for you. End quote. He later says, quote, "This is how this is going to go for you. Piss us off. You won't have a shower. You won't have nothing." End quote. They then leave the room, and Webb comments, quote, "I'll fucking punch the cunt, I tell you." End quote. Charlie Francis replies, quote, "If you don't, I will," end quote. The incident continues as D728 covers and continues to cover the observation hatch. Both Webb and Francis shout and swear at him. Webb is heard to say, quote, "Help us and we'll help you. Dick us about and we'll make your life a living fucking misery." End of quote. He then calls him a fucking twat. D728 continues to cover the observation hatch. Webb says he's doing it again. Quote, "He's pissing me right off." And substituting his name for his cipher, D728, "Stop being a fucking idiot," end quote. Webb continues, quote, "I'm not in the fucking mood for you today," end quote. And D728 responds, quoting him, "I've tried to take my life and you try to bully me." End of that quotation. Webb replies, quote, "Do you think I care? I ain't in the fucking mood for you, all right." End of that quotation. Callum Tully asks, well, how do you deal with someone like that? And Aaron Stokes, who he is talking to at that time, says, "Chin him." Steve Skitt arrives and goes into the room, another member of staff. There is then a conversation between Steve Skitt and D728 regarding his medication, an incident when D728 climbed onto the netting and D728 tried to hang himself. I'm now going to ask that that footage be played. And there are two parts to this clip. It's KenCov 1044. It's V 2017-0706 000007, so the 6th of July. And the first clip lasts... I'm still speaking. The first clip lasts about 7 minutes and the second is about 2 minutes. Thank you.
American Trust, India 4. Is it possible to get a manager down to CSU room 2? Over.
Oh, can you repeat your last over?
Is it possible to get a manager to CSU room 2? Over.
Just send mine.
I keep going in, keep taking it out, and he just keeps putting it up. Well, I don't know what. Can I sit here with the door open or?
Yeah.
The amount of times I've been in to take it down.
Right, if I have to come back here again, you won't be going anywhere today. You'll be staying down here permanently. You understand?
I don't know why am I here?
You got on the netting last night.
So what? You refuse to give me my medication.
I didn't refuse it. I didn't refuse
I
it.
don't care that I'm here because
Yes.
somebody's not giving my meds.
Right, and what did they tell you last night?
But, bro, it's not, I'm not fit. I'm
What?
not feeling
What?
well.
What did
But no one tell me nothing. All I know is I'm not
Yeah,
taking
no,
no
Nick,
medication.
you agreed with Nick last night
Yeah,
that you wait until the doctor come in this morning.
No. He told me in the morning you go back. I was told that.
No, it was you will see the doctor this morning,
Keeping me here.
and you agreed. You agreed.
No. He's keeping me all over me. Because then they
No, I'm not.
You get all that.
Listen, I don't want to be here.
No, I'm not. Yeah, no one wants to fucking be here. I don't want to fucking be
But
here.
why am I being here? I'm not allowed to smoke.
Because you
I don't
got
get a shower.
you got on the
You
netting.
have a shower.
Let me have a shower.
You
Well,
want
it depends on your behaviour. Once I've got the
I
staff,
have a shower.
you can have a shower. Once I've got the staff, you can have a shower.
Right. When did I say you got a shower? This morning.
Later, you said.
Thank you.
Yeah, but what time is later?
I said it'll be about an hour. That's what I told you.
As soon as I've got the staff,
I'm
you
I
have a
need to clean
shower.
myself. I need to pray. I've got nothing in this room. None of my property is here.
You should have thought of that before you got on the netting.
So what? I should have killed myself last night. Then I
Oh.
would.
Yeah.
I'm seriously. I'm not. I have to stop.
All that shit you get out of this.
Steve, what shall I do? Just keep leaving it?
I'm going there.
Right, come on.
That's it. I don't care. I want a cigar and I need to smoke.
Right, one. The shop is not open yet.
But the shop open, bro. It's fucking 8:30, bro. The shop
The shop opens at 9.
And the shop opens.
Okay, you're so fucking clever. I'm
No,
not
I've
a
been
cigar.
going to the shop every day, 8:30. Well, how can you tell me?
The shop doesn't open till 9.
But it's not in my property then.
Will you give it a rest?
Fucking rest. Yes, I had medication for 8 hours. 3 days I had to make.
Right, shut up a minute. Your fucking attitude depends on how this is going to go for you. This is how it's going to go for you. Piss us off, you won't have a shower, you won't have nothing.
The doctor said you have got enough medication in your body to last you 4 weeks.
What? The fucking doctor refused my medicine.
Well, not the reason why.
Bro, I'm not having my medication.
Perhaps he thinks you don't need it.
But you got your medication. I don't have my medication.
I don't have medication.
No, I'm not feeling well.
I will do till I finish.
I'll just keep going in, Charlie.
Just go in and take it off, mate.
Yeah, I will.
I know it's a pain in the arse.
No, it's all right, mate.
You don't, I will. Right, put it down there.
Okay. Give.
Whatever you're fucking doing, mate. Depending on how you behave here, it's depending on how this is going to go for you.
Where's the toilet?
Right? It's a big grown up.
Well, no, I'm allowed to
Help us, and we'll help you.
Look, I'm
Kick us the bell,
I
and
don't
we're
know.
not going to fucking
I
help
don't have my property, so I don't have no ruler.
you. Help us, and we'll help you. Kick us the bell, and we'll make you laugh a living fucking
I'm
misery.
moving here. Keep me a room with no way about lunch. I don't care. I want to shower and I want to break. 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock to the break, 6 in the morning.
Well, but you should think about these things. But you're responsible for your own actions, mate. Right?
He's supposed to give me my medication. Just tell
In your 4.
Chair, before we go on to the next clip, more than one source has told me it's not Steve Skitt, who I mentioned a little earlier as someone who has a conversation with D728. It's someone certainly called Steve, but I'm not sure the last name is known, but what I'm told is it's not Skitt. So apologies for that. Can we then go on, please, to play the last of these two clips, which is part of the same reference, but starts at 1750. Oh, 1750. 1750. Yep, that will do, thank you.
What's the time?
It's just gone 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock. Tomorrow it's fucking done. You're doing it again. You're pissing me right off. Stop being a fucking idiot. Fucking be a fucking man, yeah?
I'm trying to keep
Child,
myself.
be a man, not a child, yeah?
It's not going to help, mate.
I'm not in the fucking mood for you today.
I'm trying to take my life and you trying to put me in
I don't care. I ain't in the fucking mood for you. Alright?
I'm trying to keep myself, you trying to put me in social confinement. It's not over.
Mate, it's 9 o'clock in the morning. It's just a joke. You're going to run out of toilet roll soon. How do you deal with something like that? Chilling.
I think that's enough of that. So, Moving on then, please, to another detained person. D1275, court participant, appeared in the programme on the 14th of June. The footage shows him appearing in the exercise yard intoxicated and unwell, having used spice. Healthcare staff attend to him, conduct basic observations such as taking his temperature and blood pressure. He's then moved to a room. The footage shows him being mocked by Nathan Ring in the presence of other staff members, asking him, "Does your face taste nice? Because you appear to be chewing it off." Derek Murphy then says, "I've no sympathy for them, absolutely no sympathy for them at all. If he dies, he dies." The footage shows that healthcare staff remain present, monitoring his heart rate and his oxygen saturation. And a nurse has a conversation with Callum Tully about the use of spice in Brookhouse, voicing an opinion that someone will die soon. When a nurse asks for D1275's name, Tully and Ring look it up in documentation, and Ring reads his name and then asks, "How do you pronounce that?" And he answers his own question by saying knob, and we'll stick with div. 1275 is heard singing, and Nathan Ring continues to mock him, asking him whether he took requests, and refers to him as div and scrotum. When the nurse states that his heart rate is still high and it needs to return to normal, he comments, "I'll get him cold water, that will sort his heart out, that will do it the world of good." When asked by Callum Tully what 1275 is doing now, Ring comments, probably gurning, checking out the inside of his skull, eyes are rolling around. D1713, he is also a court participant and a formerly detained person, has provided evidence that inquiry but is vulnerable and unable to give live evidence. He's been diagnosed with PTSD and severe depression. He's a Nigerian national who was detained at Brookhouse between the 31st of March and the 17th of April, and between the 20th and the 22nd of April, a total of 19 days. He left Nigeria because he feared for his life after being brutally attacked, and he arrived in this country in July 2009 on a student visa, which expired in April 2012, and he remained in the country as an overstayer. On the 22nd of October 2015, he was convicted of an offence and conditionally discharged and fined. He arrived at Brookhouse late one night and waited for a long time in reception before being seen by a nurse, as he recalls it. He says he wasn't asked if he was a victim of torture or if he wanted to see a doctor, and he wasn't asked specific questions about his mental health. After the assessment, he was taken to C Wing and locked in his room. Says he felt very low and had thoughts of hurting himself. Following day, he saw Dr. Chowdhury, who prescribed antidepressants. He wasn't asked many questions or if he had been a victim of torture, and there was no examination of his scars. He then saw a mental health nurse. Again, he says that he wasn't asked if he was a victim of torture or about his scars. He continued to have thoughts of harming himself. Following these consultations, 1713 was placed on an ACDT plan and observed every hour. He says that he was sometimes observed less often, and the staff members observing him didn't speak to him but only checked he was in his room. He describes being unable to eat in his first days in detention and no one checking whether he'd eaten or not. He continued to feel mentally unwell and was reviewed by a mental health nurse a number of times. He describes these consultations as brief and feeling that he'd not been given the time and space to say how he felt. He describes how he was threatened by staff at Brookhouse and treated in a way that was often degrading and at times abusive and offensive. He recalls an incident where he asked a female member of staff whether she would lock up a dog like she was locking him up every night. She responded that she would never lock up her dog, but she would lock him up. He was shocked and didn't know to whom to report the incident or how to make a complaint. He describes people who were vulnerable, often self-harming, being physically mistreated and manhandled by staff. At Brookhouse, he recalls incidents where distressed detained persons were subjected to physical force to be taken to the CSU or the block, even where they were not resisting. He says he felt unable to report any of these incidents or make any complaint. He often saw detained persons under the influence of drugs, including at one time his roommate, who smoked spice in their room. He found the use of drugs to be frightening. At times he felt at risk from other detained persons. On the 17th of April, he was transferred from Brookhouse to Harmondsworth without notice. He'd been doing his laundry and was forced to pack wet clothes and wear a wet t-shirt on transfer. 3 days later, on the 20th of April, he was transferred back to Brookhouse. On reception, he was seen by a nurse who again seemed not to listen to him. He wasn't asked if he was a victim of torture or if he wished to see a doctor, and 2 days later, on the 22nd, he was transferred back to Harmondsworth. He doesn't appear in any video footage from Brookhouse. D1473 was formally detained at Brookhouse. He has provided a witness statement to the inquiry, and he is a core participant. He too is vulnerable and unable to give live evidence. He was detained at Brookhouse from the 19th of August to the 29th of September 2017. He suffers from mental health problems which were made worse by detention. He describes that his experience of detention was very difficult for him. Prior to arriving at Brookhouse, he'd been detained at the Verne. An ACDT plan had been opened for him while he was at the Verne, and on the 19th of August, he was transferred to Brookhouse. On the 23rd of that month, there was an attempted removal of him to Nigeria, despite him having outstanding representations to the Home Office, which had been made on the 16th of August. He knew of the charter flight scheduled for the 23rd of August, but had been told he wouldn't be on it. And despite this, a manager at Brookhouse told him that he would be on the flight. He explained that he shouldn't be on it because the Home Office had yet to consider his further representations for leave to remain. He was shocked and frightened about what was going to happen to him. He retrieved his paperwork, but nevertheless was moved to be put on the flight. Staff members, he says, didn't listen to what he said. He didn't resist, but nonetheless was placed in a waist restraint belt for a lengthy period of around 5.5 hours, which he found both painful and humiliating. He found the experience of that night terrifying and humiliating from start to finish. Following this episode, he saw a mental health nurse. That was on the 26th of August, as his mental health got worse and he felt suicidal. He was also in physical pain. He made complaints concerning his attempted removal and restraint on the 23rd of August. The Home Office referred the restraint complaint to Taskor. Both complaints were rejected. So, Chair, that's all I have to say about the statements of formerly detained persons, and that's all the footage I'm going to play during the course of this opening statement. I now move on to non-governmental organisations as well as some other witnesses, and just summarise what the inquiry is going to hear from them. First, you'll hear evidence from Anna Pincus, Director of the Gatwick Detainees Welfare Group, as well as James Wilson and Jamie McPherson from that organisation. The group has been working with detained people at Brookhouse since it was opened in 2009. Primarily, that's done by a network of trained volunteer visitors who visit detained people to offer empathy, support, practical help, and friendship. Visitors are matched with a detained person and can meet them each week for as long as they're detained. Additionally, GDWG have a team of advocacy coordinators which included Anna Pincus during the relevant period, who coordinate and support the work of volunteer visitors and provide support and advocacy for detained persons, including providing extra clothing and phone credit, liaising with legal representatives, and signposting to legal advice or external organisations. And you will hear evidence from her on a number of issues, including Brookhouse management restricting the number of drop-in sessions which they were allowed to have with detained persons, telling them it was inappropriate for them to refer detained persons onto other agencies, allegations that management were inappropriately defensive when GWG reported concerns about the well-being and safety of detained people, lack of trust between GDWG and G4S as well as the Home Office, the behaviour of managers towards GWG staff and having an effect on their work for detained persons, including making them more cautious about saying anything that might be construed as criticism of management. That GWG received reports from detained persons of physical mistreatment. The fact that some detained persons reported instances when detention and healthcare staff verbally abused them. And one thing in particular that she talks about is detention officers would, with obvious disdain, tell them to go back to your own country, while others said they'd witnessed abuse directed at themselves or others, including racist terms. Her overall impression was that many officers during the relevant period viewed detained people negatively and behaved towards them in a manner which ultimately dehumanised them or contributed to their dehumanisation. And reports from detained persons that staff failed to intervene when people were bullied or abused by other detained people is another of the themes with which she deals. She deals with their views on the barriers preventing detained people from disclosing mistreatment, whether to them or to others, and their work on the scale of mental health problems and other vulnerabilities among detained persons and their treatment by and access to healthcare, and finally concerns about the level of oversight and scrutiny provided by the IMB. Freedom from Torture, that is a UK-based human rights organisation who provides specialist psychological therapy and clinical services to survivors of torture. They also provide training for professionals working with torture survivors, as well as campaigning for change here and across the world. Chair, a significant number of men detained at Brookhouse during the relevant period have said that they were previously the victims of torture, and you'll hear evidence from Sheila Reynolds, Head of Asylum Advocacy, who says that Freedom from Torture is a UK-based human rights organisation and one of the largest torture rehabilitation centres in the world. Each year, the organisation provides clinical and legal services, including medico-legal reports to more than 1,000 survivors of torture in the UK, the vast majority of whom are asylum seekers or refugees. They also have a legal advice and welfare service that provides support to torture survivors in treatment as a Freedom from Torture centre. You're going to hear evidence from Anton Boll from the Forward Trust. He was leader of the substance misuse team within Forward Trust at Brookhouse during the relevant period. He describes the presence of drugs, particularly spice, within Brookhouse, and notes that some detained people would begin using drugs for the first time while at Brookhouse to alleviate their distress and forget about being detained. The Forward Trust provided training to staff, induction for new residents, as well as group workshops and one-to-one sessions for detained people who wanted help with drug and alcohol use, which Mr. Boll believes were successful based on feedback. And substance misuse services are now provided by PPG, who are the current incumbents of healthcare at Brookhouse, as you know, and have become part of their overall healthcare department. The inquiry has also obtained evidence from other NGOs who will not be called to give oral evidence, but whose statements will be disclosed and published on the inquiry's website. This includes evidence from the British Red Cross, Detention Action, Bail for Immigration Detainees Bid, and Inquest. One other witness you are to hear from is Dr. Dominic Aitken. He is an academic who was coincidentally doing research at Brookhouse during the relevant period in June and July. He was given relatively unrestricted access during his time in Brookhouse and carried out observations and interviews looking at how staff responded to self-harm and suicidal behaviour and how dealing with detained persons' distress fit into their responsibilities. Summarising what he says, he saw one detained person withdrawing from alcohol addiction and observed staff to be ill-equipped to deal with such a serious issue. In the main, self-harm and suicidal behaviour among detained persons was taken seriously by staff at Brookhouse. However, a minority of staff thought self-harm was sometimes used by detained persons as a form of manipulation, or was attention-seeking, or was a protest against deportation. He says there was one member of healthcare staff who made several observations which Dr. Aitken thought were insensitive and unprofessional, but that he was no longer employed by the time Dr. Aitken reported his concerns. And he also reports detained persons complaining about their medication being confiscated, but that their complaints overwhelmingly centred on what they saw as the unfairness of Home Office processes relating to detention and deportation. In addition, you will receive evidence from Reverend Nathan Ward and Owen Syred. Reverend Ward is a former G4S employee and senior manager who worked for the company from 2011 to 2014 and worked at the Gatwick removal centres from 2011. His last job title between July 2012 and May 2014 was head of Tinsley House. He appeared in the Panorama programme as a former employee and whistleblower. Owen Syred worked for 2 periods with G4S as a DCO and as a welfare officer. The first period started in October-November 2009. From late 2009, early 2010, he worked on C-Wing at Brookhouse, then he worked on E-Wing for 8 to 9 months in 2011. He resigned in late 2012, early 2013, for a role with the company GEO, which is a secure prisoner service provider, as a prison escort officer for court and tribunal appearances. However, he returned to G4S in around April 2014, where he remained until June 2021, when on the 16th of June he was dismissed by Serco, as you know, which is the successor organisation to G4S at Brookhouse, and he says that was on grounds of ill health. Chair, it's 3:05. I've still got a small amount to deal with in terms of experts and then something to say about other reviews and reports. I hope to finish today, but if I can't, I might just have to borrow a little from tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Perhaps we can have our
break
break now and come back at, say, 20 past.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I'll see you at 3:20. All right. Thank you.
Chair, let me say a little now about the three experts who have been instructed to assist you in fulfilling the terms of reference of this inquiry. Professor Bosworth and Dr. Hard have produced expert reports which have been disclosed to call participants, and as I said before, in Phase 2 you will hear live evidence from each of them. Professor Bosworth is a Professor of Criminology and Director of the Centre for Criminology at the University of Oxford, where she is also a Fellow of St Cross College. She's been conducting independent academic research inside immigration removal centres in the UK since 2009, during which she has visited all the centres, including Brookhouse. Whilst there, she interviewed detained persons as well as staff who work with them. She's published a range of pieces that have drawn on this research, including a research monograph, numerous book chapters, academic journal articles and reports. She contributed a literature review on the impact of immigration detention on mental health to the 2016 Review into the Welfare in Detention of Vulnerable Persons by Stephen Shaw. In 2018, she produced a literature review on alternatives to detention in his follow-up review. She also co-convened an event on staff culture and contributed a paper on this topic which was included in the 2018 report. She viewed all the relevant BBC footage as well as examining other material held by the inquiry in order to prepare her report. And she reaches a number of preliminary conclusions. In summary, she considers that the evidence provided to the inquiry so far shows that in 2017, Brookhouse was an institution with a number of problems. Her view is that while some of these problems were specific to Brookhouse at the time, many of the issues raised in the evidence, including low levels of trust and a lack of clarity of institutional purpose, are common throughout the immigration detention estate. She found that high rates of staff turnover, low levels of trust among staff and about the detained men, combined with an immigration process that was hard for anyone to understand, and a population with poor mental and physical health, and the presence of drugs created a difficult and volatile environment. She identified additional factors, including widespread unchecked sexism, some level of racism, xenophobia, which made matters worse. She found that Brookhouse, under these conditions, was neither sufficiently caring nor was it secure or decent for the detained population or for staff. And while noting that there has been considerable passage of time since the 2017 events, and a new company is running Brookhouse, Professor Bosworth concluded that the evidence submitted to the inquiry holds a number of lessons, not just about the past, but also for the future. Addressing those lessons, her view is that to ensure that the events of 2017 do not recur, greater attention needs to be paid to the balance between care and security, to eradicating racist and sexist beliefs and language, and to developing a shared culture with the detained population that emphasises the dignity and decency of all. Dr. James Hard was asked to assist the inquiry with his expert opinion in connection with the medical and clinical care issues within Brookhouse during the relevant period. He holds a degree of Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery, MBBS, and is a Fellow of the Royal College of General Practitioners. As a GP, he developed further special interests in substance misuse and prison medicine. He's worked in several English and Welsh, both public and private sector, prisons, and has over 15 years of experience. He's the chair of the Royal College of GP Secure Environments Group, an associate advisor to the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman, and provides clinical advice across the general practice substance misuse and prison domains. He's been a clinical reviewer commissioned by NHS England to assist the PPO with death in custody investigations, and he's contributed to the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, NICE, Guideline Development Group for the physical health of people in prisons. Dr. Hard has viewed a selection of clips of the BBC footage, as well as CCTV and body-worn camera footage, and has examined other relevant documentary material held by the inquiry in order to prepare his report. And based on his review of the available documentary evidence provided to date concerning the relevant period, he's concluded that the system for Rule 35 and the Adults at Risk policy were inadequate and would benefit from a review in order to establish a more dynamic and efficient approach to detained persons considered to be at risk. His view is that the systematic approach to the training and education of staff in a number of areas was inadequate. He found this was particularly relevant to the use of force, ACDT and Rule 35. He concluded that none of these features directly resulted in the mistreatment of detained persons. However, his view is that as a result of deficiencies he identified in each of these areas, overall, there was an inadequate system for the prevention of mistreatment of detained persons. Based on the observations he made, he provides a number of high-level recommendations in order to try and address some of these issues, all of which we will hear about in due course. Jonathan Collier, or also known as John Collier, was the head of Centre of the National Tactical Response Group, the NTRG, of Her Majesty's Prison and Probation Service, HMPPS, from November 2019 to June 2020. The NTRG are responsible for the development and delivery of all use of force training for accredited users of the curriculum. Mr. Collier is now Operational Practice Delivery Manager within the Directorate of Security at HMPPS. He's been a prison service use of force instructor for over 25 years, which has included instructing of both managing and designing the syllabus currently being used within HMPPS and other approved agencies, including the Immigration Detention Estate. He has been the national lead for restraints in juvenile settings and assisted with policy and procedural development across both sectors. His experience extends into incident management and local governance and scrutiny of use of force incidents at all levels. He's provided establishment support to both HMPPS and privately operated immigration removal centres. He was the initial lead for the development of a bespoke Home Office restraint system for escorting, and his extensive knowledge of use of force related rules and policies. He has acted as an expert witness for several high-profile inquests and inquiries. He has provided Sussex Police with 3 reports related to a particular incident at Brookhouse regarding the use of force incident involving D1527 and DCO Jan Pascali on the 25th of April, about which I've already made mention, and the video footage from which we have viewed. The purpose of those reports was to assist the police and the Crown Prosecution Service with the decision whether to bring criminal proceedings against Jan Pascali in relation to that use of force incident. Sussex Police carried out a criminal investigation, following which a case was passed to the Crown Prosecution Service. On the 7th of November 2018, the Crown Prosecution Service informed D1527 that no criminal charges would be brought. And you will recall that I have already summarised his conclusions to Sussex Police as regards that particular use of force incident on the 25th of April. For the purposes of his report to this inquiry, he has been asked to set out the relevant rules and guidance governing the use of force at Brookhouse and to provide his expert opinion in relation to 43 of the 109 use of force incidents which occurred during the relevant period, and whether they were each carried out in accordance with those rules and guidance. 37 of those incidents were chosen because they were a cause for concern to the inquiry. 3 were provided as examples of where the use of force seemed to be necessary, reasonable and appropriate, and 3 were provided as random examples for additional context. He is reviewing BBC, CCTV and body-worn camera footage, as well as any written documentation held by the inquiry in relation to these incidents. And once his report is finalised, Mr. Collier's report will, of course, be disclosed to court participants, and he too will give his evidence about it in phase 2. So let me leave experts behind and let me turn finally to other reviews and reports. Chair, in your determination of scope of the 6th of January of 2021, you said this inquiry needs to build on the findings of other relevant reviews and investigations, but would not seek to duplicate the work of others. Several reports have followed the revelations made in the Panorama programme. In July 2018, Stephen Shaw published his report, Assessment of Government Progress in Implementing the Report on the Welfare in Detention of Vulnerable Persons. G4S commissioned Verita to conduct an independent investigation into concerns about Brookhouse. Verita reported in November 2018 these facts, or some of them you'll remember from where I started yesterday. The Home Affairs Select Committee, HASC, was prompted by the broadcast and wider concerns about the inappropriate use of immigration detention and its damaging effect on the mental health and well-being of detainees. Finally, in July 2019, the National Audit Office reported on the Home Office's management of its contract with G4S to run Brookhouse Immigration Removal Centre. For now, as I said before, I'm only going to summarise 2 of the reports, the Shaw report and the Verita report. Let me begin with Shaw. The report covered various immigration detention centres, including Brookhouse, and involved visits to Brookhouse in September 2017, November 2017, as well as January 2018. And this was his follow-up to his 2016 report. He noted on the basis of these visits that the Brookhouse site, quoting him, is cramped and remains prison-like in personal and communal spaces, end of quotation, and he expressed disappointment that the Home Office had gone ahead in adding a 3rd bed to some rooms in which Mr. Shaw did not find conditions, as he put it, remotely acceptable or decent. In light of the programme, broadcast as we know in September 2017, whilst the report was in progress, Mr. Shaw said he knew, again quoting him, that he needed to say much more about staffing and staff culture and the impact they have on detainee welfare, end of quote. Some of the findings that he made in relation to healthcare at Brookhouse include that mental health staff would see patients they believe to be unfit for detention, but whom outside hospitals wouldn't accept. Rule 35s were identified by healthcare staff as a key issue, with staff suggesting it was outside their competence to interpret what constituted torture, and that Home Office case owners dismissed these reports too readily, damaging the relationships between clinical staff and patients. More broadly, Mr. Shaw recommended that those assessed as being at level 3 of the adults at risk policy should only be held in detention in exceptional circumstances. Next, he said that staff felt that detainee demands can be unrealistic and that exaggerated health needs were used to delay deportation or maximise benefits before removal. He said the undercurrent of suspicion and disbelief among staff when talking about detained persons who self-harm was also identified by Dr. Dominic Aitken, who I referred to a little earlier, and Mr. Shaw added a high proportion of the written complaints were about medication. In relation to oversight, it was noted that it was evident that G4S's whistleblowing procedures were not sufficient to bring the misconduct identified in Panorama to the attention of managers, that there was a good system for monitoring and responding to complaints, and the formal complaints process was robust, that the IMB's resources for Brookhouse were insufficient, and although it was right that each contractor had its own monitoring processes, the Home Office needed to strengthen its second level of assurance, including monitoring, as he put it, recruitment, quoting him, recruitment, training and development, performance management, the adequacy of whistleblowing arrangements, the monitoring of formal and informal complaints, the gender/ethnicity mix of staff, the numbers and visibility of managers, as well as the methods for recording and monitoring use of force. It would also be valuable to assess contractors' processes for monitoring detainee views. Ending quote. Some of the findings about staff included that in some cases staff felt unsafe as a result of staffing levels, particularly when constant watches took some staff off of the units. In one case at Brookhouse, there was perceived to be a lack of control as a result. There was one staff member, he said, who had been a DCO at Brookhouse, described growing a thicker skin after the first couple of months on the wing, saying, quote, "I think through time and from experiences of having people self-harm or do certain bad stuff, you just grow immune to it. It's just part and parcel of the job." And that ends that quotation. Mr. Shaw added, in this regard, Brookhouse had experienced a hemorrhage of staff, exacerbated by Panorama, but also related to things like the higher salaries offered in prisons. And finally, in this regard, he said it was arguable that as a large organisation, G4S could have done more to, quoting him, fully utilise its company-wide staffing resource in support of Brookhouse, end of quote. So that's him. Let me turn to the Verita report. In November 2017, soon after the Panorama broadcast, G4S commissioned Verita to carry out an independent investigation into concerns about Brookhouse. The terms of reference stated that the purpose of the investigation was to, quote, "understand the extent and root causes of the matters highlighted in a Panorama programme dealing with the treatment of detainees at Brookhouse, and it would examine G4S's management, operational and staffing arrangements and the practices and behaviours of G4S staff." End of quote. During the course of around 5 months, Kate Lampard and Ed Marsden, the authors of the report, had unrestricted access to Brookhouse. They carried out interviews with a large number of staff and management there, as well as with some NGOs and oversight bodies. And those interviews have been disclosed. As I say, the report was published a year afterwards in November 2018. Their findings about management at Brookhouse include that since opening there had been a history of dysfunctional relationships and instability in the senior management team, that management arrangements were at their weakest in relation to frontline management by detainee custody managers. They didn't have the numbers, the capability or the training to give the necessary attention to line managing detention custody officers. In relation to staffing, they found that the staffing plan prior to September 2017 didn't provide enough staff to ensure the smooth running of the centre and an adequate regime and activities programme for detained persons, that there were problems with staff retention for various reasons, including inadequate pay, lack of bonuses, no pay rises, which had been made worse by Panorama, and quoting what they say, quote, "The lack of staff and the failure to retain staff had a profound and detrimental impact on many aspects of life at Brookhouse for detained persons, managers and staff," end of that quotation, and that staff shortages meant that violence among detained persons was not properly managed and sometimes left staff and detained persons feeling insecure and unsupported, and that they perceived Brookhouse as unsafe. As for the environment there, Verita reported that although Brookhouse was not at capacity, the authors were left with an overwhelming impression of it as overcrowded and unsettled. The activities available didn't meet the standards under Rule 17 of the detention centre rules, posing a risk to detained persons' welfare and well-being and to the general safety and security of the centre. The standard of cleaning had been a problem for some time and was unacceptable. G4S had incurred significant financial penalties under the contract as a result. As for the care and welfare of detained men, they reported that there were a number of management committees involved, but these were chaired poorly and lacked focus. Staff didn't have time to address the needs of detained persons. Although risk assessments were conducted regarding room sharing, staff felt under pressure not to allocate single occupancy. From May 27 until March 2018, the induction policy had been largely disregarded, something which they said was entirely unsatisfactory. Staff understood their obligations under the ACDT process, but didn't engage with the detained person subject to it. And incidents of bullying and violence had not been investigated properly since 2015, according to the Violence Reduction Manager. As for healthcare, nursing staff attended all planned use of force incidents, but they had no formal training for their role and responsibilities in relation to the use of force. The provision of healthcare services was good and probably faster for most detained persons than if they were in the community, and detained persons had strong concerns, and there was significant distrust of healthcare staff. In relation to the use of force by staff against detained persons, Verita reported that beyond Panorama, the authors were given further cause for concern about staff attitudes to the use of force on detainees and about the processes for managing and overseeing the use of force at Brookhouse, that although use of force was meant to be subject to scrutiny meetings, scheduled meetings were usually cancelled due to the lack of a use of force coordinator. The authors noted that given the potential consequences for both detainees and staff of any unauthorised use of force or of any poorly planned or poorly managed use of force incident, it is essential that there is regular and rigorous review and oversight of all use of force at Brookhouse. And lastly, in this regard, there was a previous weakness of staff not wearing body cameras, but they had been wearing them since March 2018. In terms of culture and relationships, they said most detained persons said they had no complaints about how staff treated them, though many centred on staff being too busy to give them the attention they would have liked, and some found interactions dehumanising or said staff lacked training or experience. In a survey of detained persons, some mentioned threats or violence from fellow detained persons. None mentioned physical assault by staff, though a few referred to verbal abuse. The authors stated that they were left with concerns that some staff and DCMs at Brookhouse might exert a malign and undue influence over colleagues, and that their behaviours weren't subject to appropriate challenge. And the risk of inappropriate behaviour by staff was heightened by 4 issues: the absence of strong and visible management, ensuring reinforcement of expected behaviour. That's the first. The second is the lack of staff. Third, inexperience of many staff. And fourth, an assertive, laddish culture. As for the ability to whistle-blow and raise concerns, there was a need for Brookhouse, they said, to have a more relevant local policy referring explicitly to the need to report inappropriate conduct or abusive behaviour by fellow staff. Staff said that they were unwilling to report concerns about staff and managers, and the report authors thought that there should be a single spreadsheet logging all alleged misconduct by staff, however they might have come to light, with action being taken. And finally, in relation to oversight in NGOs, they reported that Her Majesty's Inspector of Prisons' January 2017 report had been positive and did not clearly identify certain issues that had been evident since at least mid-2016, including the lack of staff, disaffection of staff, inadequacies of management arrangements and behaviour, and the size or nature of the detainee population. More focused questions, they say, might have identified some of these issues, and it was noted that HMIP, the Inspectorate, had changed its report. The IMB's May 2018 report, covering the year to the end of December 2017, did not mention weaknesses in administration and governance at Brookhouse, particularly regarding the use of force. The authors thought that the tone of the report was more accepting and not as critical or challenging as it might have been, something which was in keeping with what they found when meeting the IMB. It was observed that the IMB had a tendency to over-empathise with G4S rather than holding them vigorously to account. They turned attention to GDWG, the Gatwick Detainees Welfare Group. Their relationship with managers and the Home Office became strained, they said, in 2017, with the G4S senior management team being unnecessarily defensive and possibly over-identifying with the Home Office. Home Office managers dealing with them acknowledged that the Home Office monitoring of the performance of the contract at Brookhouse tended to be based on consideration of the individual elements of contract performance and compliance, and that they hadn't taken an approach that examined and questioned the wider concerns of the care and welfare of detained persons, their quality of life and experience of being detained in Brookhouse. And finally, in this regard, despite all of it, the authors of the report found no evidence that any agency or senior manager knew of a significant problem with staff behaviour and treatment of detained persons before Panorama. The authors concluded that they didn't believe that these events should have been predicted. The report also made over 50 recommendations, again something to which we will have to return in phase 2 together with the other reports I've mentioned but haven't been able to summarise today. So, Chair, that's all I propose to say by way of opening remarks on behalf of Council to this inquiry. You will want to invite opening statements from the legal representatives on behalf of the court participants. I anticipate, looking at the time, that will be tomorrow morning.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. That's good timing for us to stop there. And we will reconvene at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you very much, Mr. Portman.
Right.